Chris O'Connor here. Join the Curmudgeon Rock Report's invite-only curmudgeonly community at facebook.com/curmudgeonrock. Also look out for a Spotify playlist that pays honor to this episode.
This is the Curmudgeon Rock Report, and this is your podcast made by rock geek iconoclastic outsiders for rock geek iconoclastic outsiders. For those of you who lament that rock music has gone the way of jazz and slipped into niche genre status, we are here to keep that flame alive by providing insight, analysis, recommendations, and honest takes, not hot takes. And hey, there's a good chance you'll learn some rock history you never knew before.
Covers. Let's talk about them. A few years ago, I walked into a bar in downtown Austin on a Saturday night with a couple of friends. A local band was playing. No surprise there, that's pretty much why anyone who doesn't live in Austin walks into a bar in downtown Austin on a Saturday night. It was unnaturally loud in there. Carrying on a conversation with strangers was pointless. There was one thing I heard very clearly and joyfully, however. This band, which seemed to be playing mostly country and classic rock covers, and perhaps a couple of tunes that may have been original, suddenly busted out an interlude of Lil Jon's Get Low. Yep, yes, the whitest people you know instantly frenzied its gathering into shouting that swinging refrain, "Ah, skeet, skeet, motherfucker, ah, skeet, ah, damn." That was an immediate and wonderful entry into the cover band Hall of Fame. So, why do no-name bands play tricks like that Lil Jon one? Because it's fun. Duh. That is rock and roll right there. Party and piss 'em all off. I mean, why is it that every other time I walked into a bar here in the United States, the band on stage plays a cover of Tom Petty's Mary Jane's Last Dance? Because it's an amazing song most people with brain cells and ears enjoy singing along to while drinking beer. It is all about the experience. Very rarely is our interaction with cover tunes about the artist's interpretation. What if it is, though? Then we begin to graduate to something special. Here's another indelible concert-going moment for me, and for that matter for Arturo. Sleater-Kinney, perhaps the best female rock band that has ever existed, blasted through Creedence Clearwater Revival's Fortunate Son during the encore of its May 23, 2000 performance at Irving Plaza in New York. It was a daring choice from the vault, a yowl of Vietnam-era outrage against privilege and power through the eyes of a young man bashed out with an intense nihilism by three young college-town Gen X women. Corin Tucker definitely wasn't no fortunate son, and she channeled a feminist rage into her vocals. This was a subversive feat, one that actually didn't dawn on me until a few days later. Okay, so that was special. But there's a level of special that goes even beyond Sleater-Kinney and Fortunate Son. What if the cover becomes the definitive statement in your mind? Or in the culture's mind? This has famously happened on stage, captured for eternity on live albums and concert specials. Think of The Who absolutely destroying, in the best way possible, Mose Allison's lightweight piano-driven 1957 shaker Young Man's Blues. Some artists love a song so much and explore it so deeply that it follows them into the studio and shifts sound, shape, color, and occasionally reality as it travels from rehearsal to recording. Have you heard Black Sabbath's theatrical metal ballad from 1972 called Changes? Have you also heard late British soul singer Charles Bradley's 2016 covers of Changes too? Then you have officially unheard the original Sabbath rendition, and you will never need to hear it again. Bradley's take is that good. Now that sets us up for this episode of the Curmudgeon Rock Report. Arturo and myself, Chris O'Connor, we will be counting down our choices for the 30 greatest rock cover songs of all time. Here were the criteria we used to come up with this list. First, each song on this list is either a rock and roll song or of another genre covered by an artist of unmistakably rock and roll disposition. Second, each cover version we feature was released after the original version. That knocks out more contenders than you'd think, hence why we won't be covering Nothing Compares to You by Sinead O'Connor. Third, and most importantly, the cover version of the song became the absolute definitive version of that song. It is either the only version most of us know, or it is the version most aligned with a cultural zeitgeist. Take, for example, Joe Cocker and the Wonder Years. We'll just let you sing the rest. Others have dared to assemble a list like ours over the years, but we think the list you are about to encounter will reign supreme in your mind by episode's end. It'll certainly have more balls. And with that, we welcome you into the corridors of the Curmudgeon Rock Report. The Curmudgeons are really, truly your best source for this kind of rock talk and ridiculous banter. We're professionals, but in the bedroom sense. That makes us awesome. Covers.
Oh, in the bedroom sense. What the hell does that mean?
Yeah, I know. It's like, Let's Get It On is not going to be on this list. However, Marvin Gaye is. Covers, and more covers. Anyway, they have covers over in that other side of the space-time continuum, right?
Yes, they do they? I didn't know that.
Yes, the parallel universe has its own covers, which are sharper and crisper and are all hits, and they're all done by rock bands who are still relevant to this day and are up on the grand stage making asses of themselves at the Grammys. So, welcome to the Parallel Universe. Basically, this is our shtick where we cover new or new-ish records, new as in a very recent vintage, new-ish as we can go back as far as a decade. There is a vault of treasures that go back to the most recent era here that we cover.
Actually, this album came out last year.
It did?
Came out in summer of last year.
Oh, okay.
They're a band called Automatic, and the name of the album is Excess. They come from Los Angeles. Automatic are a trio that can be best described as fuzzy, lo-fi, yet sultry and seductive synth pop with irresistible earworm hooks and melodies. Their latest album, like I said, came out last year, came out 3 years after their 2019 debut, Signals, also a very good album. Now, retro 80s synth pop is a field that has been, to put it very mildly, exhaustively mined by indie rock artists for nearly the past 2 decades to annoyingly homogeneous effect.
Oh, yeah, no doubt.
What separates Automatic from the pack of same-sounding synth pop revivalists is that Automatic employs a drummer and a bassist that actually sound like a drummer and a bassist on record, not something overly processed to Pro Tools lifelessness.
Or drum machines and,
Right,
and
exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
And this rhythm combination grounds and adds warmth to Izzy Glaudini's synth keyboard washes that can alternate between soothing and abrasive, sleek and jagged, and menacing and inviting. Imagine if New Order had maintained Joy Division's darkness and augmented it with the glorious, balming quality of the rhythms of the German band Neu. Standout tracks for all you non-album listening youngsters: On the Edge, Venus Hour, and Turn Away. Chris?
What I like about this record is that it is not a gimmick. It is not shtick. It is not reverent or nostalgic. I think it's kind of a brilliant choice that if you're going to do an album about a soulless, lifeless, corporatist future, to make it as icy and as detached and as indicative of that mood and of that. It's not melancholy. That's not the word I'm really looking for, but it's that sort of resignation and acknowledgement that the robots may be taking over at some point.
Yeah.
And so it's the lyrics and the themes and the concepts that dictate the sound. That fascinates me.
Right.
it's worth pointing out, coincidentally, two things. One, it's interesting that we mentioned the Germans. Stay tuned. That's a subject that we will be studying in depth, considering it keeps coming up over and over and over again with new bands these days.
Yeah.
So that's one point. And then two, this is something that has become really fascinating to me over the last couple of years. There are so many young women bands and artists in the Los Angeles area are really, really good. I mean, a lot of really good bands and a lot of good music from female artists coming out of LA.
You have LA Witch, who are pretty good, even though they're a little bit derivative of the Jesus and Mary chain. But I also like Bleached a lot.
Yeah, Bleached is great.
Really good. Death Valley Girls, they just came out with an album.
They're great.
I haven't listened to it yet, but.
Yeah, and you know that I like Grace Ives. I mean, she was like in my top 10 last year, and she, as far as like bedroom electronic pop goes, that was very, very good. So that's all LA, and so this is a thing now. So be on the lookout for these young female bands, all really good, all really smart. Now we go from LA back to the UK, and I like this album. Arturo and I, because we go back 30 years, like literally 30 years, can get a little in-jokey sometimes. And so this one, I could see us back like when we roomed in Astoria a few years later, like these sort of like, weird exercises of like, what if this person was in this band and this person was the singer?
Yeah.
And so while I think it's a great album on its own, it answers the question that everybody and their brother might have had at one time in their weird life. What if REM or the Sundays were fronted by Richard and Linda Thompson? And so it's a strange listen. So this is The Tubs is the name of this band, and the name of the album is Dead Meat. It came out this past January. And like I said, it's a very, very strong record, really tight pop songwriting. And it's fun, but it's also got, an emotional range and also some socio-political commentary in there as well. But again, it's a real singer. The guy sounds exactly like Richard Thompson. And weirdly enough, a couple of these songs and a couple of these hooks sound like they could have been on a couple of those Thompson records from the late 70s, that they kind of did on the cheap, but also has some like hidden gems in them. So so there's that. So the album opener, here's the weird part though, is you listen to it and the album opener is a song called Illusion Part 2. And in the first 38 seconds, when we listen to it, or when I listen to it, I'm saying, oh shit, they sound like dry cleaning. I hate dry cleaning. The band Dry Cleaning, not, dry cleaning, but the band, Arturo and I are in agreement that they're way overrated because that lazy lead speak singer girl or woman just nails on a chalkboard.
It's just a spoken word abstract gibberish, and I still don't know what she adds to the band.
Right, exactly. And so you get through those first 38 seconds where there's a little bit of like kind of speak singer, poetry thing from the lead dude. And then all of a sudden it turns into this really lovely, like I said, reverent pop song from the 80s college days. I think that the edgiest song on the record, I think the best song on the record comes in the middle of it. It's called Sniveler. And it's a little bit different than the rest of the album. There's an even tighter, stronger energy that really kind of derives almost not necessarily Husker Du, but it's more Minneapolis in its sharpness. And it's just, and then it segues into this really, really lovely harmony. And that's where all of a sudden Linda Thompson comes in. And so, there's a part of me that's like, I don't care what these people's names are. I'm just going to call them Richard and Linda.
Right.
Yeah. But it's a really cool listen. And it's one of the better albums that I probably will hear all year. And, if you love like strong pop hooks and, that kind of passionate singing, basically, if you like Richard Thompson and REM, you're going to like this record, right, Art?
To me, this album is just one big meh. I mean, basically, it's retro 1980s UK indie jangle pop. Imagine it just sounds like this is like a couple of kids, and we can call them kids, a couple of kids who heard Rolling Blackouts, Coastal Fever, and decided, you know what? Let's reproduce that with Richard Thompson on vocals.
Hey, it's Chris. Yours truly, Curmudgeons, record the Curmudgeon Rock Report using a program called Zencastr. And we have used this program since we launched a little over 2 years ago. And much like we have evolved, so has Zencastr. The company was essentially in early startup mode at the time, and, there have been bugs and annoyances along the way. But one thing has remained consistent: the quality and the value for us of the product itself. You see, Zencastr records the tracks of a podcast's participants natively. That means our recording session itself is never subject to the inherent unpredictability of the cloud or the inevitable half-assedness that some all-in-one podcasting platforms will have across their functions. Most importantly, since I am in Houston and Arturo is in South Korea, reliable recordings and excellent capture of our Ars Technica USB microphones is absolutely essential. So here we are now in 2023, 50-something episodes into this curmudgeonly journey. And here Zencastr remains. The company just switched from a credits model to a subscription model. Zencastr, we believe, is headed for big things, and we strongly suggest that you use it to record your own podcast. We now return to our regularly scheduled program. Rock on.
So here we are, folks, the definitive, because the Curmudgeons fucking said so, the definitive list of the 30 greatest rock covers of all freaking time. We're going to start, we're going to do it in 3 parts, 30 to 21, 20 to 11, 10 to 1. We're counting down. Number 30, Chris, who is it?
Okay, Urge Overkill's Girl, You'll Be a Woman Soon.
Yep.
So like we said, the idea here is that these covers are either better or more culturally essential, that in a way that they've kind of replaced the originals in our mind. This is one of the most vivid cases of that on this entire list. Girl, You'll Be a Woman Soon was a modest, I think, hit for Neil Diamond back in Neil Diamond's heyday there, in the border between the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
Well, Urge Overkill, which they were a band from Chicago, and they had a moment in the sun briefly in 1993 and 94. This is from Pulp Fiction, and we'll get into that in a second. But 2 guys named Nash Cato and King Riser, they were from Chicago, and they had a brief run of success right as you and I, Arturo, started college in 93 with a nice single called Sister Havana. So they kind of were similar to another band from Chicago that actually broke out the exact same times, Smashing Pumpkins. Very sort of reverent to 70s, part cocaine, part acid rock, that kind of like Boston. But Urge Overkill was a little bit more sci-fi than that. And maybe they would have been a bigger deal if it hadn't have been for Smashing Pumpkins, because Smashing Pumpkins was like 15 times better overall. And this was a good band. I mean, I actually liked them for the stretch. But anyway, so they do a cover of Girl, You'll Be a Woman Soon. And lo and behold, it shows up in the movie Pulp Fiction at a critical moment where Mia Wallace and Vincent Vega come back from a date, and Mia Wallace accidentally snorts a line of heroin that she had stolen from Mr. Vega and ODs. But she dances around to this song right before she does that. And so that becomes so indelible that it will bake into your mind. And also, it's a great cover. It's got the same kind of romanticism, but it's a little bit louder, a little bit more urgent, and a little hornier than Neil's.
Yeah.
So there you go. Anyway, so who are we talking about at 29 there, sir?
Number 29, it's the Eagles and their version of Tom Waits's Old 55. Now, file this under fuck all you Eagles haters out there.
Yes.
Yes, we purposely put this song in there, but I really do believe, and I think Chris does too, that this is better than the Tom Waits original. Listen,
sure,
I love me some Tom Waits. I'm a big Waits fan, But as far as I'm concerned, Tom Waits begins in the early 1980s because his 70s music really is not that good. It's a lot of just overblown cocktail lounge music, a lot of faux pretentious, beatnik poetry bullshit. And a lot of those records kind of like do that. It wasn't until Tom Waits got avant-garde and kind of went out there to the fringes that his music really improved. However, on his 1973 debut album, Closing Time, there is one beautiful nugget of a song called Old 55 that the Eagles took and just made it soar to the heavens. Glenn Frey's vocals are among the best vocals he ever laid on any Eagles song. Henley complements him perfectly. The harmonies that all the Eagles do on this record just really, and I love Tom Waits, but they kind of blow away Waits' old croak on this version. It's just they take Tom Waits' lament about escaping from some horrible crime. The crime is insinuated in this song and is getting away from there. And the sun is rising up. I'm getting out of here, and I'm riding with Lady Luck because I'm gonna need it.
Yep. Exactly. I'm getting the fuck out of town. Yeah.
Getting the fuck out of town. And the Eagles make it a heroic song. Only the Eagles could have taken this. And of course, remember, the Eagles, they fashioned themselves as outlaws themselves.
Yeah, that's the thing. You got to remember, this came out in, right after they had done the Desperado record.
Yeah.
This was, I think, a year later.
Right.
And so they were still in that mindset. And Frey actually had a beat on this song before Waits' version was released. I guess he had gotten access to the demo that Waits sold before then. And so that's, I think, why you can say that this was polished. Basically, Waits' version, like you said, this was before he went the dramaturge Bertolt Brecht route with his, sort of, like you said, that dramatist over-the-top style that he adopted that brilliantly in the 80s. And so it's just like this sort of straightforward piano bar lament song that he does, just kind of subdued. But the Eagles take it, and it's everything that was great about the Eagles version 1.0.
Yeah.
And so it's got that warmth. You get that pedal steel guitar by Bernie Leadon, which adds depth.
Right.
And you have the harmony vocals, where Randy Meisner's finest moment besides "Take It to the Limit,"
right,
I think, is on this song, because man, these harmonies just soar. And it also, I think, it underscores the musical partnership of Henley and Frey, and shows that they were how their chemistry together was so strong, not just as songwriters, but in manning a song like this. It's one of the few songs, if not maybe the only song, where each gets a lead vocal part.
Yeah.
As far as I know, it's the only one that's coming to mind where both of them have a lead vocal part. So, this is a very, very, very orthodox Eagles version 1.0 arrangement and song. It's just lovely.
Yeah. All right. So now 28. One of my all-time favorite bands, one of Chris's all-time favorite bands, REM. Yes, they wrote their originals, but they made some great covers too. And this is their version of the garage rock, obscure as shit garage rock song, Superman. Right, Chris?
Exactly. Well, it was obscure up until 1986. Yeah, exactly. When REM ended their brilliant album, Life's Rich Pageant, with this song. So this is by The Click. This is a song that was originally released as a B-side in 1969. It's it's got a lo-fi, groggy quality to it with, groggy guitars, but it's got Prettier Than It Has a Right to Be harmony vocals. It's got some weird piano stuff going on. And then by the end of the song, it just sort of breaks out into this sort of really sunny, really sweet, but really kind of warbly, weird psychedelic effect. And so it's really, I guess it's a love song.
Kind of a creepy love song. Like, you're not getting away, girl. I'm going to get you.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's a creepy love song. The original version is creepier because they make it sound like it's like the most like heartfelt ballad, first dance marriage song possible from a bunch of, stoned out hippies in 1969.
Yeah.
So REM takes it, and, God bless Bill Berry. because in this band's hands, it becomes desperate and urgent. And like you said, it kind of gets into that creepy stalker mindset or whatever, because you get Bill Berry sort of forcing the drums at points, like way up. And then you also get Mike Mills and Michael Stipe. They had their own sort of harmony style, which
Although
was,
Mike Mills is more upfront in this one.
yeah, he is. And they, even in some of the Stipe, or like Don't Fall on Me is an interesting example of the kind of dynamics of how they kind of go in and out with each other.
Right.
And it's not so much lovely as it is just striking and compelling and just heartfelt.
Yeah.
And so I think that version of there's a sincerity on the one end and a desperation on the other that I think makes this just a great exercise for them. And it's a perfect song for them.
Yeah.
To, where they were as a band at the time and the kind of pop that they were producing.
Yes.
It was a perfect fit for that record. That album is one of their 2 or 3 best, probably.
Yeah, maybe. I have it at number 4, but that's a discussion for another time. Okay.
It is.
It will be.
Yes.
Number 27, Lynyrd Skynyrd and their version of the J.J. Cale song Call Me the Breeze comes from their 1974 album Second Helping. Now, the J.J. Cale version is, like most J.J. Cale songs, laid back, swampy blues rock, chilled out oaky, smoking a joint, call me the breeze, baby. In Lynyrd Skynyrd's hand, it's in their hands, it becomes bravado, honky tonk bravado is what I would call it. A blazing guitar solo, blazing piano solo, horn section just ramped up to the max. And of course, Ronnie Van Zant and his blustery vocals. It just makes it sound like Lynyrd Skynyrd. And it is probably the best song. They did quite a few covers. It's the best song they ever covered. It overwhelms J.J. Cale's version by quite a bit.
Oh, absolutely.
And it became a classic rock staple for a reason. It's one of the best tracks Skynyrd ever recorded, period, original or cover. And by the way, R.I.P. Gary Rossington, who the last original member of the band.
Yes. R.I.P. Gary Rossington. We can't let him off the hook anymore for going full patriot because, at least when Rossington or Billy Powell were still around, we could say, hey, but, these are the remnants of this great fucking band. You're right. This song is Skynyrd showing off.
Yeah. And
it's a fun song, and it allows Alan Collins to just absolutely rock the fuck out, in terms of the solo his brains out.
Yeah.
It allows Billy Powell to solo his brains out. And then obviously the horns come in and you're just like, okay, well, this is just reaching ridiculous heights now.
Yeah.
And so you're right. It's a staple for a reason because it's so much fun.
Speaking of Southern rock, number 26, yes. What is it, Chris?
So this is the song that defined Lucinda Williams' 1998 masterpiece, Car Wheels on a Gravel Road. But it's also the only song on the record she didn't write.
Yeah.
Which is, to me, kind of amazing. So this song, it's Can't Let Go. The original version of this song, well, we talked a little bit about those nameless bar bands at the beginning of this episode. So this was a guy named Randy Weeks, who was based in Los Angeles. And he did this song in 1989. And the original arrangement of this song, which again is a song about obsession, it's got the most bar band arrangement imaginable, to the point where you would think it was originally in the movie Roadhouse.
Which isn't really a compliment. It's not a very good film, Chris.
Well, hey, no, Roadhouse is the Citizen Kane of terrible movies. I enjoy it. It's not a good movie, but it is enjoyable as hell. Anyway, it's the kind of thing you would expect to be there. In Lucinda Williams' hands, it becomes just this amazing, searing, the desperation, the anger, the whatever you want to call it, the edge. I mean, it's almost like they cut the tape with a razor blade, or somehow this was produced by a razor blade, which I guess in a way makes sense because it was co-produced by Steve Earle.
Yeah.
And later, Roy Bittan of E Street Band fame added some overdubs. And so, you've got everything in here. You've got like nasty slide guitar. You've got Lucinda Williams, those kind of, smoky, just awesomely sexy vocals.
Yeah.
This sort of skittering drum. It's sped up. It's both quiet and loud.
Yeah.
And so it's the spirit animal of that record. And just tells you everything about Lucinda Williams' genius to take this sort of standard bar-friendly song about male angst and to turn it into something that defines her on-record character. It's genius. Absolute genius. And to be honest, Arturo, I think that this should have been probably higher on the list, but I had to give you this one because I had other fights to pick.
Yeah. And yeah, I see the argument for this being higher. And if anything, this song itself should make people out there listen to the album Car Wheels on a Gravel Road. Not only one of the greatest albums of the 90s, not only one of the best, in my opinion, pure country music albums of all time. It's one of the best albums of all time, period. It's a record that should be listened to in its entirety. It's an absolute stone cold classic. It is arguably her best album, although she has a few others that are great. But it should make you want to listen to the album.
I need to point out, by the way, and so this is going to be one of the themes of this episode. So this entry from Lucinda Williams at number 26 is the first of 5 songs on this list by female artists covering songs originally done by men.
Yes.
And making them better or more urgent or more subversive or smarter or something. So speaking of which, number 25.
Number 25, Kim Deal and the Breeders in their version of Driving on 9. Kim Deal was originally, as we all know, or should know, the bass player for the Pixies. And she struck out on her own because Frank Black's or Black Francis's ego wouldn't let her have any more songs on the Pixies. Right. So she said, you know what? I'm going to form my own goddamn band. And she, unlike the Pixies, the Breeders actually had a hit in 1993 with their all-time classic album. Seriously, Last Splash is one of the defining alternative rock albums of the 90s.
Yes.
And she had a huge hit. She had a huge hit with a Cannonball. But tucked in that album toward the end, not quite the end, is a cover called Driving on 9, written by Dom Leone and Steve Hickoff. Who are these guys? These guys were in an alternative folk group from Boston called Ed's Redeeming Qualities. Yes, that's their actual name.
Yes.
They were generally labeled, they were generally anti-folk. Anti-folk is what Beck was a part of when he briefly went to New York City and did his experimental folk stuff before he went back to LA and became Beck as we know him. Mm-hmm. And really, the original version is just, a lazy, kind of weird, grubby, lo-fi folk song. In Kim Deal's hands with the Breeders, it becomes this beautiful, wistful, kind of a chiming country rock song. And her vocals on it are really they're touching and they're sweet. Kim Deal was a very underrated vocalist.
Yeah, and I agree.
She really adds, the band really, but the Breeders themselves add something just lilting to this version. It's a beautiful, beautiful way for that album to end. And it hits the mark. It's better than the original. It's the defining version. And yes, it came out after. And yes, this should be on the list.
Yeah, absolutely. So the original, you talked about Ed's Redeeming Qualities. So Dom Leone was one of the co-leaders of this band. He died, I believe, of cancer in 1989. I believe it was. And so this is sort of a tribute to Ed's Redeeming Qualities while she's doing this. Now, the original version, it's very much in that anti-folk, almost going back to the Daniel Johnston approach of clearly a one-take, lo-fi, who knows, maybe even a tape recorder of them singing it. It's got the violin, but it's this guy singing it. It's very charming. And here's, strange but true. There were 2 violin players in that band. One of which her name was Carrie Bradley. When the Breeders did their first demo in either 89 or 90, Carrie Bradley played on the demo with Kim Deal, and I believe Tanya Donnelly was tucked in at that point because it started off as everybody's side band.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, when Tanya Donnelly was in Throwing Muses, but Carrie Bradley plays on that. She also plays on this version. So the violinist from the original version is on this version of Driving on 9, which adds to the poignancy. And so you take this charming, almost kind of goofball male sort of road romance kind of song, and you put it in Kim Deal, and it becomes very sweet and very poignant and just very rich. And the mandolin by Kelly Deal is also fantastic on this. And so, yeah, a great song.
Right. All right, number 24. And this is one, we're going way back here. Chris, the Beach Boys.
Yeah, this is probably one of the more mysterious, or probably the most mysterious entry on this list. And so on Pet Sounds, a lot of folks who are listening to this podcast will revere Pet Sounds as much as we do. We're pretty much in agreement that probably is one of the top 10, maybe 5 records ever made.
Maybe 3.
Yeah, I know. I think it was on number 2 on several recent greatest of all time lists. But anyway, so they did this song called Sloop John B. And now Sloop John B., according to the academic studies of it, it has origins in the Bahamas. And it's a folk song. It's a very strummy, very Caribbean folk song about what amounts to the worst ship ride of all time. Storms and drunkenness and fights and all of this. And they can't wait to get off that boat. Yeah. Well, anyway, so who knows where the origins are tracked to, but it first comes into Western consciousness in like 1915 or 16, where there was somebody out there, it was like a linguist or some sort of musicologist, caught onto this and made a very crude rendering of it and got it published. And then in the 1920s, somebody was putting together what he called the American Song Bag, not song book, song bag, and included this on this. So the first known recording of it comes from the mid-20s. Well, then what happens is that the Kingston Trio, you remember if you've ever seen the movie A Mighty Wind.
They're spoofing the Kingston Trio.
Yeah, basically they're goofing on the folk revival of the late 50s and early 60s. Well, the Kingston Trio, they unbury this song Sloop John B., and they include a very orthodox folk, acoustic, happy-go-lucky version of Sloop John B. on an album in 1958, becomes a hit. Well, Al Jardine, who is a member of the Beach Boys, he's like the only guy in the band that wasn't related to anybody else. He's just everybody's buddy. Yeah. He was the folk music enthusiast of everybody in the band, and he brings it to Brian Wilson. Brian Wilson's like, meh. And so Jardine plays around with with the structure. He twists and bends a few notes and a few keys, and he kind of does some subtle things with the changes and the chords and all of that. And he gets it into a Beach Boys idiom. And Brian's like, okay, I can run with that. And it becomes one of the more masterful arrangement jobs on the entire record.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody will recognize those chimes. Everybody will recognize, that harmony, which is, one of the better. It's one of, obviously it's not the best harmony performance by Brian Wilson on that record, but it's close. Yeah. I mean, it's up there with Wouldn't It Be Nice, for sure. And so there you go, folks. The Bahamas folk somehow travels from the academic eggheads to Brian Wilson as he's in the middle of melting down. Quite a story.
Yeah, and also the key moment of this song, and Mike Love does the lead vocals here.
Yes,
the key moment is like toward the end of the song. That has a break, and Mike Love says, "This is the worst trip we've ever been on." Remember, this album came out in 1966. Tripping had a different meaning back then. Number 23, Led Zeppelin and their version of Willie Dixon's "I Can't Quit You, Baby." Now, here's the thing: throughout those first 2 Led Zeppelin albums, they are stealing a lot.
Oh, yeah.
They stole a lot from Robert Johnson. They stole from Muddy. And they did not give credit. They just planned it. Plant and Page wrote this, and they stole a lot of riffs, melodies. Yeah. The big hit from Led Zeppelin 2, Whole Lotta Love. the not only the lyrics but the vocal melody taken from a Small Faces song,
Yep.
Hello Steve Marriott.
Yep.
However, there's one song that they just could not, in good conscience, they could not put the Plant Page songwriting credit on, because it's a direct cover, and it's the
Yeah.
only one that is a direct cover, and it's I Can't Quit You Baby from Led Zeppelin 1. So basically, if you've heard the Willie Dixon original, which you should hear, it's really good, but it's kind of a breezy, sashaying, pleasant blues tune. In Led Zeppelin's hands, it is powerful.
Oh, yeah.
That Bonham drum, those crazy Jimmy Page guitar passages, and his soloing, and of course, young Robert Plant just like was untouchable as a vocalist during this time. It is the definitive version, and I think even Willie Dixon, when he was alive, if you give him if you had given him a few shots of whiskey and asked him the truth, he probably would have said, "Yeah, those white boys outdid me."
Yeah, exactly. So there's a power to the song. All hail John Paul Jones too, because he has a hell of a bass pocket in this version as well. And so it's a blast. Now the original version is very, very Chicago performance. The funny story there is that Willie Dixon wrote the song for Otis Rush. And Otis Rush, another bluesman from the Chicago blues scene. Rush was having problems dumping his mistress. It's like, oh, my wife's on to me, I have to behave, but oh shit, I can't quit you, babe.
All right, next, number 22. This is Pearl Jam and their version of the folk singer Victoria Williams' song Crazy Mary. Chris, take it.
Gotcha. So this version of Crazy Mary by Pearl Jam, it was an inclusion on a benefit compilation record called Sweet Relief. And Sweet Relief, by the way, is still going as far as I know.
Oh, really?
So Sweet Relief is an organization that actually Victoria Williams formed. Now, Victoria Williams' story, she was married to one of the founders of the Jayhawks and would occasionally show up on Jayhawks records as a vocalist or a backup vocalist. But she had her own folk rock, or basically folk rock career. And she had done this song called Crazy Mary. She was very croaky, by the way. She had a very croaky voice from what I remember. It wasn't all, it's a lovely song, but her version wasn't all that lovely. Well, what ended up happening is around like 1990 or so, Victoria Williams was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And like a lot of music artists and a lot of artists, period, didn't have health insurance.
Right.
And so Sweet Relief was the idea was, here's a benefit record, and all of the proceeds of it will go towards her care. And so that was kind of the concept. So Pearl Jam steps in and does this absolutely lovely version of Crazy Mary, and it just fit where Pearl Jam was at that point. It was like almost like Eddie Vedder and Victoria Williams. It was almost like a portal between their two minds.
Yeah,
in some ways, because the kind of melodic vocabulary that Vedder was dabbling in that period. This is when Versus came out. It was around the same time.
Yeah.
And it really just defines wonderfully, also beautiful guitar playing by McCready. It's, just beautiful acoustic soloing and just really, really just lovely. And Victoria Williams is on there as a backup vocalist too.
Sure.
So there's just some lovely, lovely harmonies. So one of those sort of defining offshoots. It seems like a lot of those bands, remember back then where you had stuff like No Alternative and Sweet Relief, and it seems like everybody had a benefit record for something.
Right.
And this is Pearl Jam's inclusion. For what it's worth, a few years later, Sweet Relief also did a tribute album for Vic Chestnut,
yes,
who had been paralyzed, I believe, in a car accident.
Right.
So another wonderful folk songwriter. He was from Georgia. And so, yeah, so there you go. A little bit of charity to pump into this list.
And now, speaking of charity, the Who are very, very giving in their covers. And our number 21 is the Who and their version of Eddie Cochran, 1950s rocker Eddie Cochran's Summertime Blues, the live version from 1970s Live at Leeds album, arguably the greatest live rock album of all time.
Yeah.
Now, Chris, you mentioned once that every version of every song on the Who's Live It Leads is the best version.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
So-
That's just it's a marvelous record.
Yeah. So we got to choose one. We choose Summertime Blues. This song was done in 1968 by the San Francisco hard rock band Blue Cheer. Blue Cheer were a big Touchstone influence on Rush, actually. And their version is really, 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 really good. But the Who's version, the live version of the Who, is just whoa. Oh my God. What a
Yeah.
proto metal, just like shove it down your throat. This is rock and roll moment. The Who blow this song up to proportions. Keith Moon's drumming is, well, exactly what you expect Keith Moon to be.
Exactly.
I mean, it's Townsend doing his windmill kicks, swinging
it's-
his arm. It's
seriously.
Daltrey swinging his microphone, doing the whole bravado. This song is just dynamite rock action. And with all due respect to Eddie Cochran and Blue Cheer, it blows them both out of the water. On this episode, we gave you the 30 greatest rock cover versions of all time. For the next episode, Chris and I will finally delve into a subgenre of rock that we've referenced many times on this show, whether it be the general episode topic or our parallel universe segment. That's right, we are finally tackling krautrock. If you're offended by that term, especially if you're German, don't worry, we understand. We prefer to call it German progressive rock from the 1970s. These were bands and artists that had an immense and immeasurable influence, not just on various forms of alternative and indie rock music from the late 1970s onward. David Bowie, Talking Heads, The Cure, Killing Joke, Depeche Mode, Nine Inch Nails, and Radiohead, just to name a few. But were also huge, undeniable touchstones on electronic music as it evolved from the middle of the 1970s to encompass ambient, synth pop, techno, house, acid house, trip hop, and all forms of EDM and beyond. We're going to dig deep and profile the major players and names from this fascinating period of rock, and indeed pop, music history from this most fascinating of decades and get to the bottom of why and how they were so important. Join us next time as the Curmudgeon Rock Report brings you a krautrock exploration. Yikes, there's that offensive word again.
Okay, so now we're in the second third of this list. It's a fun list. It was really a great week just listening to all these songs, originals and these versions and other versions. But the versions on this list are the best. Why? Because the Curmudgeons say so. Number 20, Cream and Crossroads, and the famous version of Crossroads, which is actually a live version from a live album from 1968.
Well, it's a double album. Disc 1, you talk about Wheels of Fire. Disc 1 is studio, disc 2 is live.
Gotcha. Okay. Yep. And so, but this is the famous version, not the studio version. This is Eric Clapton, Jack Bruce, and Ginger Baker at their absolute finest and at their absolute coolest. I mean, you're talking about, this is one of those instances where you had a supergroup and it actually was a super group. You're talking like the best at what they do in London at the time, all doing their thing. And it's just this really great rumbling version of it's a Robert Johnson song. So it starts off and it dates back to the 30s. And the original is this very, very sultry, sexy, slow solo guitar, sounds like, it's the cliche, the beer commercials with the old sweaty old black guy playing the guitar in an empty bar. It just has that thing. Well, these guys take it and they ramp it up and they jam it, and it is a rhythmic monster and so much energy, and perhaps Clapton's best performance as a guitarist, as a soloist, and I would say definitely his best vocal take, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. I mean, there was a time when Eric Clapton was really cool, and this was it.
Yes, and this is him doing his best Jack Bruce impression because
Yeah.
before we recorded this, we established that I was getting the vocal attribution wrong. So good job, Eric. You fooled me. So good stuff. Anything to say about Crossroads?
Yeah, I mean, it was also like the last real Cream album, Wheels
Yeah.
of Fire. Yeah, this is a blistering live version. It's the reason when back in the mid '60s when he was with the Yardbirds, the whole thing "Clapton is God" was like spray painted on the
Sure.
wall of some club somewhere. This is why people thought he was quote unquote God, is because of this kind of performance. It really
Oh,
was.
absolutely. And for what it's worth, since one of our missions as the Curmudgeon Rock Report is to educate younger minds to keep the rock and roll spirit going, let us recommend what my favorite Cream song, Swallow Bar.
Love those lyrics.
Yeah, just a weird, with the rainbow has a beard. Yeah, just a really strange but wonderful song with, again, Jack Bruce on vocals and these almost like Clapton playing the guitar like he thinks it's a kazoo. It's a really great but strange song. So anyway, go check it out. Swallow Bar. It's spelled sort of like it sounds. The search engines will correct the spelling. You'll be able to find it. Anyway, number 19. We're
Number
sticking
19.
we're sticking with old school blues.
Old blues guys from the 1930s at number 19, a selection that I fought very hard for, the
Yeah.
White Stripes and their blistering version of Son House's Death Letter. Well, it was originally Death Letter Blues. The White
Yes.
Stripes just renamed it Death Letter from their 2000 album De Steel. And this needs to be put on there because, frankly, younger generation, not younger generation, but people like around 2000 had no idea who the hell Son House was until the
Nope.
White Stripes, unearthed this song. Their
Yep.
version, I said, it's blistering. It is romping, stomping, ass rampaging punk blues to the max. Their version is definitive. It is classic. It is epic. It builds. It has drama. Jack White adds some passion to the lyrics of the song about a guy who just loves this woman so much and just realizes one morning that she's dead and he has to bury her because no one else will. It is
Right.
it is just move. It's moving, lyrically moving, musically powerful. It proves that, yes, Meg White was not a technically brilliant drummer, but in the context of the White Stripes and what Jack and
Yeah.
Meg were doing, her drumming was appropriate. He guides the music so well to that breakdown section in the middle, and then builds and builds and builds. It goes back to the intro riff. It is just a titanic piece of blues rock, among the best ever recorded by anyone. And I would challenge Jimi Hendrix and Eric Clapton to do this song better than the White Stripes did.
Yeah, I agreed. So the White Stripes concept. Now, a couple of months ago, we did a legacy episode on the White Stripes, and we made the point then that part of their concept was to just let's play like we're a young boy and a young girl, and we're sweet, and we're innocent and we have feelings. But the other thing was it was a blues deconstruction.
Mm-hmm.
And really, I think, as I've described it for 20 something years now, it's Led Zeppelin without Robert Plant or John Paul Jones. What if it was just Jimmy and John?
Right.
And so you got to take from De Steel, you're pretty good looking for a girl, and then Death Letter. And they define the White Stripes concept right there.
Speaking of essence and crossing ethnic boundaries, number 18
pretty much
is Santana and their version of the salsa legend Tito Puente's Oye Como Va. And you're going to talk about it, Chris, not me.
Yes, I am. And so I fought for this one over Black Magic Woman only because I'm a big fan of the original. Right. Peter Green at his weirdest. So Santana is a young, impressionable Mexican American kid from the San Francisco Bay Area. Forms a band that is about as multi-ethnic, 60s put in a blender as it gets. I mean, come on, you have the founders of Journey were in this band by the time they got to Woodstock, right? And so not only is he like we said we didn't include Black Magic Woman again, only because I think that this is more indicative of what Santana was about, his range
Right.
and his soul. And this is more, I think, closer to his heritage. And so the idea that, Santana could do acid rock and he could do, London blues, but he could also
Salsa.
he could out Tito Puente in a lot of ways. And so just this sort of spiritual, it's Santana doing that gorgeous lead guitarist. There's other, I think, there's other guitarists out there who are more mighty, but Santana's solos were just routinely just beautiful, just gorgeous.
They were emotional and they were lyrical. That's that's the key word for Santana.
Yes, solos. Lyrical. Yes. Yeah. Just beautiful, almost like a poetry to the way he played. And I think it comes out really, really well on this song. But it also speaks to Santana, the band. Santana, the band, they were just a fun band with all those arrangements with the percussions and the organs and the way that they could ramp stuff up, and also like the backup singing and all of that. I mean, basically, you can hear Ozo. What was the name of the band? Ozo Motley.
Yes,
you can hear them coming to life in this song, and so I love it. It's like an electrified, partyfied, stonerfied version of Tito's song, and it really does honor justice to Tito.
Number 17, the man we named this podcast after one of his songs. Number 17, Nirvana and their version of the Vaseline's Jesus Doesn't Want Me for a Sunbeam from the MTV Unplugged live session. Now, the Vaselines were a Scottish indie rock band of the 1980s. Their whole thing was subversion. It was a boy-girl band. The girl sang all the raunchy, sleazy sex songs. The boy sang all the sweet little lovey-dovey pop songs. And they were noisy rock, but with like really bubblegum pop melodies. And that was why Kurt Cobain loved them so much. One of the several covers they did on the MTV Unplugged was the Vaseline's Jesus Doesn't Want Me for a Sunbeam, which is a really just very unlike most of what the Vaselines did. It's actually kind of this yearning, beautiful song about kind of rejecting religion.
Yeah.
And in Nirvana's hands, they make it into a hymn. It's very hymnal, the way Nirvana did it unplugged. There's so many great covers on this. I had to choose one. We went with this one. I think it's one of many gorgeous moving moments on the single greatest MTV Unplugged session ever made and recorded.
Oh yeah, recorded in one take, which is like I think one of the only ones that ever happened with. Right. So I'll confess, this is my least favorite of the cover versions on that record.
Really? Well, you get the Lead Belly. And we didn't put Nirvana's version of Lead Belly's, but the Lead Belly version is fantastic. It's hard to say Nirvana's version is better.
Right, but Mark Lanigan's version is a lot better than that one too. Curiously enough, Kurt Cobain sang backup on Lanigan's version from 1990.
Right. Number 16, another special record by another baby boomer classic rock band, Chris.
Yep. Yeah, this is another one of those instances where somebody else's work kind of defines the aesthetic and becomes the spirit animal for another band. Now, Creedence Clearwater Revival is a band from the Bay Area that sounded like they might as well have been from like the swamps of Louisiana. And that was kind of their thing. It was an Americana, really, John Fogerty could translate that regional sound and feel for a modern age, and within a 2-year period makes 4 of the best pure classic rock albums imaginable.
Yeah.
And made the case for maybe the greatest American rock band of all time.
Arguably.
Yeah, you could make a case for Creedence Clearwater Revival being the best band in American history. And their version of Susie Q, which was originally a hit by a guy named Dale Hawkins, one-hit wonder guy from the late 50s, was more sort of rockabilly, more sort of almost like a country stompish version. But what Creedence does is they kind of strip it down, and it's Fogerty and his very sort of fuzzed out, garagey. What would you call it? I mean, I don't know. He just had this sort of deep.
Well, CCR. It was swampy, dirty, mangy Southern rock. Arguably,
Yeah.
the irony of CCR is that they were from Oakland, California, but they arguably
Right.
invented Southern rock. Number 15, Mick and
Yeah.
Keith show up, the Rolling Stones, and their version of the Temptations, Ain't Too Proud to Beg. Now, and this version is from their 1974 album, It's Only Rock and Roll, which we are both huge fans of. Very
Love
under,
love the record.
probably the most underrated album in the Stones catalog. But
Oh,
anyway,
by a mile.
I
Yeah.
digress. This song, sorry, I should say, again, by the Temptations. The Rolling Stones, when they started out in the early 60s, they got their reputation as being a covers band. They were primarily a covers band. They were a blues and rhythm and blues covers band. By 1965, they were kind of Mick and Keith were writing their own songs. And by Aftermath in 66, they were doing all originals. It was one of the reasons why Brian Jones got sidelined, because as brilliant of a musician as he was, he couldn't write songs. But anyway,
Right.
ironically enough, for a band that got their start as a blues and R&B covers band, it's them the best cover they ever did is a Motown song. And who knew the Stones could do Motown really, really freaking well. Another band did Motown probably better than them, but that's coming later. But Ain't Too Proud to Beg is a classic rock staple on classic rock radio for a reason. It rocks the fuck
Yeah.
out. It
Absolutely.
takes the Temptations and just shoves amphetamines up their asses. It really does. And it's done lovingly. You can hear the love
Yeah.
in Mick Jagger's voice as he's singing this track. The Stones feel it. They were on a roll during this time, and this is just rocked out Motown in a way that I love Motown. Man, some of those guys couldn't rock it as well as the Stones did in here. Number 14, another Motown song, this time by a Motown artist covering another Motown artist. Chris.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's kind of like a pseudo cover, or what would you call it? A meta cover. So this is Marvin Gaye's version of I Heard It Through the Grapevine. Story here, and this is another sort of in memoriam moment here. We said RIP to Gary Rossington of Lynyrd Skynyrd earlier. Yeah. Here we have to say RIP to the great Barrett Strong, who, along with the Whitfield brothers, or Norman Whitfield anyway, was one of the songwriting wonderkins on the Motown factory. I call it a factory because basically that's what it was.
Yeah.
And so first out of the gate with this song was Gladys Knight and the Pips, who do that gospel, very fun, vocal harmony, 4-part harmony version of it. And it's probably more popular at weddings. It's just so up and just so, just sort of like it's almost sly or almost sort of jokey about the whole, hey, here's a song about gossip, but it's almost like making a, what would you call, almost like a Broadway review out of it. Right.
Right.
Or, for black folks in juke joints. In Marvin Gaye's hands, it becomes the most soulful, most honest, most just buttery, most beautiful emotional experience imaginable.
Yeah.
And it instantly becomes his song, one of his best vocal performances on tape, one of the best arrangements that was ever featured on one of his records. And, this was at that period where Marvin was starting to kind of push back on Gordy for control.
Right.
And so this is where he really starts to assert his mastery of the emotional spaces in the music. Yeah. And obviously a couple of years later, what's going on. I mean, he captures it amazingly well, but this is the start of it and kind of has that vibe to it. So it becomes not laid back, but it's mid-tempo, but tense and solemn.
Right.
While still being kind of fun. Switch.
And for all those of you who are interested, Barrett Strong, what did he write? That song, Money, That's What I Want. He allegedly, Berry Gordy still claims that he co-wrote it, but I doubt it. I think Strong wrote that on his own. But he did co-write songs with Norman Whitfield, such as I Heard It Through the Grapevine, War. You know that song, War. Dun, dun, dun. What is it good for? He co-wrote that. He co-wrote Just My Imagination by the Temptations. And he also co-wrote Papa Was a Rolling Stone. That guy was a great writer. All right, so we went from a Motown song. Now we're going to go to the other great
Yep.
independent record label owned by Black people and African Americans that catered to the African American community and eventually crossed over to the white audience. That is Stax. Now, who was in Stax? Well, in my opinion, there were a lot of great artists. You have Isaac Hayes. You have the Staple Singers were on there. But another person who was there was my favorite all-time male vocalist, Otis Redding. And in the mid-'60s, he wrote a song called Hard to Handle. Really funky, slightly gospel-y, but very soulful, driving song. It was a minor hit. However, in 1990, a young up-and-coming band from Atlanta called the Black Crowes, a rock and roll band, on their debut album, Shake Your Moneymaker, covered this song, released it as a single, and it was a monstrous hit, way bigger than Otis Redding's version ever was. And it is a dynamite song, a dynamite example of rocked up Stax. That's basically what it is. It's rocked up Stax. Sung wonderfully by one of the most underrated vocalists in rock history, in Chris Robinson. He may be a bit of a dickhead in real life, but that guy could sing like a motherfucker. And he does it on this song. And the Black Crowes version of Hard to Handle manages to be both funky, rockin', and soulful and ribald at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
Chris Robinson adds a salaciousness to his delivery and his vocal performance, to the lyrics. He brings the horniness out of the lyrics.
Yeah. I live in Houston. I mean, the South, we're famous for, getting effed up on cocaine and whiskey on Saturday and going to church on Sunday. So there's these contradictions down here. And so, the Black Crowes. And so what they do is they take Otis's version, which is an intense love song.
Yeah.
Sung to, a woman that he wants basically to spend the rest of his life with, I guess you could say that.
Yeah.
And so you take like an intense love song and you turn it into a sly sex song or like I said, an unapologetic sex song. And so that's just a neat trick, because with that swagger, I think that's the right word. That, Chris Robinson just had a swagger and a confidence to his vocals, and he wasn't doing karaoke. He was doing it the way you're supposed to do it. I mean, that guy was incredibly talented.
Speaking of hell, no, this is not karaoke. No. Number 12 is not just we gotta put an asterisk next to it because it's a cover, but kind of not really, because she puts a lot of her own lyrics in it. But it's one of the most amazing, blistering, totemic album opening songs of all time.
Oh,
Chris?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's just unbelievable in the sense that this is Patti Smith doing her take on Gloria by Van Morrison. And she opens it up with this wonderful spoken word piece, really intense, really in your face, really basically it's, taking the spirit of the original version by Them, which is Van Morrison's band, and spinning it on its head and saying almost like she makes the cover a response to the original.
Yeah.
It's like she forms a dialectic between the Van Morrison spirit of Gloria and her spirit of Gloria. It's like almost putting it back in Van Morrison's face.
Yeah.
Which I think makes it genius. And it pretty much introduces the Patti Smith we all know and wonder about to the world, and just a singular artist taking a song and just showing that you can take art and make your own art out of it. It's maybe a very ethereal, very distant, like fourth once removed cousin of hip hop.
Absolutely, and there's no better. And I still cannot think of a better opening lyric for an opening song in rock history than Jesus died for somebody's sins, but not mine.
Yep. It's like, we talked we mentioned that I Heard It Through the Grapevine might be a meta cover. No, this is a meta cover.
Yeah. Right.
For a song like this to have a rejection of Jesus Christ in the beginning of it is like, well, okay. She ain't fucking around.
Man. Speaking of not fucking around, number 11 is The
Nope.
Clash.
Nope. They never fucked around. Yep.
And their version of I Fought the Law, originally written by a man by the name of Sonny Curtis, who was the guy who replaced Buddy Holly in the Crickets. And they did their version of I Fought the Law, released it in 1960, moderate, kind of, sort of hit. But then what happened years later, in 1979, The Clash included their version as the B-side to White Man in Hammersmith Palais. Their version of I Fought the Law has taken a life of its own, and it has become the definitive rebel rock anthem of all time. There have been various versions. Even Green Day did their version of this song. But Green Day's version of I Fought the Law is their version of the Clash's version. It's not their version of the Crickets version, believe you me.
Yeah.
And what stands out about the Clash's version of I Fought the Law is Topper Headon's powerhouse drumming.
Oh, yeah.
For a band that was a punk rock band, these guys could play their instruments. And Topper Headon got his start in various jazz and prog rock.
Oh, yeah.
Before he joined the Clash. And the brilliance of Topper Headon as a drummer is that he enhanced the band's music, gave them a musicality without being flashy, without showing off. And that's the key that especially a lot of young bands and young artists nowadays can't get over. They can't get over their own ego. They got to have as many chord progressions as possible and as many tricky time signatures as they can fit into a song. No, Topper Headon could do all that shit, but he could also tone it down to serve the song. And his drumming serves the song. And of course, you have Joe Strummer, while technically not a great singer, is one of the all-time great rock and roll voices.
Oh, yeah.
And the passion that he puts in this. Well, I mean, he put passion in every song he ever sung.
Yeah, but especially like, taking this song, which is almost like, again, it's almost, what is this? This is the opposite of Old 55. I mean, this is a guy who gets caught, but is pissed off about it. but Strummer takes it and almost makes it like a protest song. It's almost like, it's almost like he's, he was very, very virulently against imperialism in Central America, obviously.
Yeah.
And so this kind of almost fits into it almost as a protest song.
Ironically enough, in 1989, when the U.S. military went into Panama, and they surrounded Manuel Noriega's compound, and they tried to get him out, the military blasted I Fought the Law by the Clash to put pressure on Noriega to give himself up. So
there you go. I mean, irony on top of irony on top of irony. Chris here again. We usually end our episodes by inviting you to join our Curmudgeonly community page on Facebook. Well, we're picking up our efforts there. Know people just as passionate as us about rock and roll? Invite them to join in the fun. You don't actually need our permission to do so. Also, expect to see a lot more content up there moving forward. Our mission is to engage you, so darn it, we'll engage you like a fire hose, or maybe like a firehouse if we're going to give love to Gene Simmons. We may also be making a few offers. Want to wear a t-shirt featuring our logo? You may have that opportunity soon. So be a fellow curmudgeon, help us expand our little community, and share your own musings via your own posts. We're at facebook.com/groups/curmudgeonrock.
And on we go to the top 10 greatest rock covers of all time. Number 10 is the most recent one on this entire list. Came out in 2016. It is by an R&B soul singer by the name of Charles Bradley, who passed away several years ago. And it's his version of Black Sabbath's Changes. Now, Charles Bradley's kind of obscure for a lot of casual fans. For real music geeks, you should know who he is.
Yeah.
He was born in 1948, and basically he spent most of his life as a chef and a cook in various restaurants. But he also on the side, for his moonlighting gig, he performed on stage as a James Brown impersonator.
Yep.
And then finally in 2011, He got a record deal, and finally, like he was like already like in his early 60s, and
Yeah.
he started putting out his own albums. And his third album from 2016, I think it also it has this nugget of a track, and it's more than a nugget. It is a powerful rendition of all things Black Sabbath. Chris,
Yeah, it's incredible. Thank the heavens and the earth for the Dap Kings,
yeah,
because they had the gift. They did it with Sharon Jones and they did it with Charles Bradley. They would find these wonderful uh, black soul singers who had been toiling in obscurity
yeah,
and were able to give them a platform to
sure,
for the world. And they had their signature sound. I mean, it's their take on deep soul. So, Black Sabbath fans out there, and that on every record, every Black Sabbath record from Paranoid on, they all kind of had the same structure where you would have the absolute bash outs. Yeah, where
yeah,
Bill Ward showed off he was the best drummer in the world practically,
Mhm.
and Tony
Yeah.
Iommi with those down tunings, et cetera, and all those geezer lyrics about Jesus is really Satan,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
all that shit.
yeah.
But every record would have that stuff. Then they would have these kind of like weird little like almost avant-garde-ish pieces by I believe Iommi. Uh,
Sure.
but then they would have at least one of these sort of lovely, ballady, almost jazzy kind of out of nowhere or ballads. And so this is one of those. This was from Volume 4, which I've been listening to a lot lately, by the way. That's a great record. But this is the ballad entry on Volume 4. And it also is arguably the beginning and the germination of 1980s Los Angeles period Ozzy Osbourne.
Yeah.
It has that feel to it because it's got this. It starts off with this piano, and with Ozzy doing his damn best to sing well. Which I mean, the thing about Ozzy is Ozzy's not supposed to sing well. That's why Ozzy's Ozzy. Uh,
Yeah.
and it's got the strings, and it's just this really just kind of almost cheesy, like it's almost like you would have expected Warrant to do a cover of it.
Yeah.
But here comes Charles Bradley, and he finds that soul and emotion and that heartbreak, and he translates it into the most orthodox, wonderful, beautiful, deep soul imaginable. Here we have a James Brown impersonator who shows up on number 10 of
Yep.
the greatest recorded covers in rock covers in history.
Doing
Good
Black
stuff.
Sabbath of all bands.
And doing Black Sabbath. Really, really neat trick. Speaking of which, we have, this song is one of those where in anybody's hand, it's a neat trick. And, Artie will disagree with me on this one, but we went with this band because, obviously when they recorded it, they could do no wrong. I mean, they were just like the best band in the world, basically, during this period. But I would almost argue for the cheesier version of this. So we're talking about Slade, the original by a band in the 70s, Slade, called Come On Feel the Noise. Most of you out there, when you think of the song Come On Feel the Noise, you will immediately hear Quiet Riot,
Right.
which was Randy Rhoads' original band. He wasn't in a band by this point, but it was kind of an outrageous, fun, kind of almost drunk, sloppy cover of Come On Feel the Noise, but brilliantly done and very indicative of early 80s metal. I love it.
Yeah.
But then in the 90s, when B-sides and singles releases were still a thing, along came this little band from basically the wrong side of the tracks in England, and Oasis decides to cover "Come On, Feel the Noise."
Yes,
Right, Arthur?
their version is the B side to to this. Well, back in B side means like one song that is the opposite, the flip of a record single.
Right.
Back
Yeah.
in the
Think of a
90s,
45.
yeah,
That's what
in the 90s, what we had were because of our CDs, had maxi singles.
Yeah.
So the single and like 2 or 3 songs
Yeah.
added to it. This is one of the B sides to the Don't Look Back in Anger maxi single from 1996.
No, okay.
Yes, and it is Oasis doing Come On Feel the Noise. And I think not only is this the best version of this song. It's by fucking far and away the best version. It blows away Quiet Riot's version. It rocks harder. It's better than Slade's version. And the reason it's a better version is that what Oasis do to this song, they pump this song up with sleaze, with swagger, with oddly enough, a really dirty, grungy feel to it. And on top of it, it has a kind of an odd swing on it. And because Oasis, this time, they were all about lumbering rock. But their lumbering rock was lumbering rock that you can actually groove to. And laid on top of it is Liam Gallagher's defiant vocals. Whereas with Slade, you had Noddy Holder singing, "Come on, feel the noise. Yeah, let's party." With Quiet Riot, when they did their version, it's just cheesy cartoon hair metal. Let's all drink and be offensive to women at a heavy metal vomit party.
Yeah.
When Liam Gallagher sings it, he is demanding you to believe in rock. He wants you to believe in rock and roll, that rock and roll can save your soul, it can save your life. And that's what the Oasis get at with this song and their version of "Come On, Feel the Noise." They get to the heart of what the song is really supposed to be about. It's about loving rock and roll, being rock and roll, and having rock and roll save your soul. And that's what Liam Gallagher's vocals, defiant, yearning kind of, he's bellowing it out, but it's yearning. Like I said before, it's defiant. And he wants to believe, and he wants you to believe that rock and roll can raise us. It's kind of gives it that, it's almost kind of gospel in a way. And it's such a powerful rendition. It kind of makes you wonder why they didn't put it on What's the Story Morning Glory.
And so now we move on to, and this is
number 8.
Yeah, this is where we start to get maybe a little controversial, and we want to hear from folks because we're going to engage in our curmudgeonly community. Welcome to our new members, by the way. We've got some velocity there, so thank you, folks, on Facebook. So when most of you out there think to yourself, okay, rock and roll covers, what comes to mind? I suspect this song probably comes first, which is Jimi Hendrix's version of Bob Dylan's All Along the Watchtower. Most lists that I've seen out there of rock covers or just covers in general, this song tends to be, if it's not number 1, it's not lower than 3.
Yeah.
However, it's number 8 on our list. Why? Could be a matter of preference, but also I think it's a matter of, I don't necessarily think this is a great Bob Dylan song to begin with. I think it's just below the others because the original, the reason that people love it is that Hendrix takes a desperate folk song about Vietnam threats that Dylan did.
Right.
Sort of in the beginning of his country rock period there on John Wesley Harding. And he takes it and he makes it this sort of mind trip and almost like an exploration of the concept of being lost to war.
Right.
And he translates it through his guitar. And so as an art feat, it's pretty neat. But he's doing it with a not so great song, and it's kind of like, it would have been minor Bob Dylan if it wasn't for Hendrix. Right. But I just think the 7 songs ahead of it are better or more transcendent or are more worthy of the rock and roll thing. And it's conceptual. What do we think of when we think of like rock and roll? We talk about basically it's in your face, taking a cover from level 13 all the way to like level 1300.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think Hendrix does that. I think Hendrix just took a Bob Dylan song that wasn't that great and made it great.
Number 7 is Neil Young's version of an old country classic by Don Gibson, a song called "Oh Lonesome Me."
Yeah, and this is where things get real fascinating. I would have put this at number 2 or number 3 personally, but go ahead.
Well, that's pretty high. We have it pretty high enough as it is.
Yeah.
But Neil Young's version is just really bites into the lyrics. It sinks into the words. And it really just, what it does, it just brings the Don Gibson version is good, but it doesn't really strike the
No.
emotion that the lyrics warrant. And even though he wrote it,
Right. Yeah.
but Neil Young really, really understands a song, grabs it, brings it out, and brings it to this slow as molasses yet yearning version that I don't think
Yeah.
anyone really can. How can you not identify with the lyrics to "Oh Lonesome Me"?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's a wonderful, like, barking at the moon, I just got dumped song. Well,
Yeah,
here's the thing. What Neil did is he did Don Gibson a favor because he rescued that song from the Hank Williams idiom.
yeah,
Because you got to
yeah,
remember, this was in that area in the 50s where basically everyone on it was Hank Williams, Jimmy Rogers a little bit before that. It was the era of
mm,
the swinging cowboys, and so everything had that sort of like almost waltzy kind of feel of like this sort of, up down, yeah, her, he, her,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
it almost had that kind of almost you had to have that kind of twang and that almost
Right.
that kind of structure. And so there were very few people who could do the Hank Williams idiom.
Mm,
Well,
right.
Willie Nelson could do it
Yeah.
because he was a professional. It's not the best Willie Nelson stuff, but he could do the Hank Williams thing.
Mm,
Don Gibson, yeah, he wrote a hell of a song, but he did it in that idiom. Don, Young rescues it, and boy does he, because man, it is a poignant, beautiful, uh, just naked performance. And that was the first album, by the way, that Young decided, you know what, fuck vocal overdubs. I want to capture the moment, right?
yeah.
And so
Right. Right.
that is a raw, non-overdub, non-fixed vocal. So now we move up to number 6,
Number
and
6. Yeah.
yes, surprisingly, it's the only song on this list by the Byrds,
Mm.
who became famous off of the good graces of either other people's songs or the Bible. Uh,
Or Bob Dylan. Period.
yeah, that's what I mean. Dylan songs, but they covered some other artists too. But basically, they became most famous for their Dylan covers. This one is the finest, and again, it's one of those songs. It's if it was in Forrest Gump, yeah, it trumps the original.
Yeah.
Or I think it was. I mean, it would or Turn Turn Turn, one of the two or both. So it's kind of like Forrest Gump music. So the Byrds, they just had this lovely, with the 12-string guitar and the melodies. Any band that David Crosby in, obviously, you knew you were going to get good harmonies
Yeah.
and good melodies and just this really folksy, very poignant, very pointed, very heartfelt, almost romantic version of this Dylan's, I guess you could say, an ode to loneliness or an ode to sort of existential angst.
Yeah.
And they turn it into an exercise in loveliness. It's like
Right.
lovely existential angst
Yeah.
with 12-string guitars. And so yeah, Roger McGuinn, he wasn't, as far as I know, he didn't write too many songs. He wasn't a songwriter, but man, that guy translate and could that guy arrange, and just a genius guitarist,
Yeah.
and
Really
just
very underrated actually as a
yeah,
guitar player.
and just the melodic line, like the 12-string. When we think of 12-string guitars and rock, there's two songs we think of first. It's a competition between Mr. Tambourine Man by the Byrds and the Eagles' Hotel California.
Yeah. I mean, Robin Hitchcock, the British singer-songwriter, said it best right shortly after David Crosby died,
Yeah,
that those early Byrds records just have this magical ability to make the listener feel like they're actually levitating
yeah, hmm
without drugs.
yeah. No, they
And
do.
and this was their first single, and this really hit the mark in that regard.
So no, so this list, I'm telling you, keeps getting better and better and better, and the tricks keep getting neater and neater and neater. So now let's move on to our next trick, which I'll tell you, folks. I fought for
No,
this as either
number 5, by the way, it's number 5.
yes, it's number 5,
Yeah.
and I really fought for this one as number 1. This is my favorite cover on this list. I also objectively think it should be number 1. And we're talking about the Grateful Dead's cover of Walk Me
Morning
Out
Dew.
in the Morning Dew,
Yeah.
and from their debut self-titled record. Arturo, talk to me and talk to our audience a little bit about this song and what makes it powerful.
Well, we talked quite a bit about it
Yes.
already in our Grateful Dead, a legacy, the Grateful
Yeah.
Dead in the studio, a legacy part 1, which we
Yeah.
covered their 60s stuff, their
Yeah.
1960s
Definitely
record.
go check that out, folks.
Yeah, you should listen to that. Really, the only thing I would say, the reason we put it down to number 5 is that you can. By the way, this song was originally written by a Canadian folk singer by the name of Bonnie Dobson. She wrote this
Yeah.
song,
Yes.
and then Jerry Garcia found the record in some bargain bin record store. Like, hey, how about this?
Yeah.
And off they went. And the reason I dropped it down a little to number 5 is because you can argue that the Dead did live versions of this song that were better than the studio version from 1967.
Oh, sure.
And,
But that holds true for everything that Dead did, almost just about.
right. But what makes this, one of the things that makes this version live, the one angle I'll take, you can talk about the mood, you can talk about the guitar playing, but what people don't realize that in his prime, Garcia was a really effective vocalist.
Oh yeah.
He was a really, really good singer, and he really dug into the words of a song. And it's his vocals on this version of Morning Dew that I think don't get enough credit. People talk of Jerry, the great guitar player, which he is, one of the greatest guitar players who ever lived. The guy's a legend. He's a virtuoso. But when, before the drugs and age got to him, he was a fantastic vocalist and a really good, not a technically good singer, but a really, really good, how would you say the word I'm looking for? He was a very good interpreter of other people's songs, but his voice also had a mood to it that he lent to every song that he sang. He gave it a warm, kind of a cozy feeling like you're listening to a good friend talking to you. And that's what Garcia adds to the Dead's version of Morning Dew, I think.
Yeah, and that's why I think I would argue for. But let me take the argument further. So you mentioned that the original is done by a woman named Bonnie Dobson, who was a Canadian singer-songwriter, right. And the most well-known version from Bonnie Dobson actually came out around the same time as this record, maybe even a year later. But that's the most well-known Bonnie Dobson version. It had been out, and so there's that. But the way she did it was almost like a folk, like almost like a folk pop, like glammed, or not, but almost like a sheen cinematic. That's what I'm looking for. It was almost like score music, and it's a song about a couple that survives a nuclear holocaust.
Right.
And I know it was featured in a movie about that, but it has this sort of almost like it sounds almost like a commercial for butter. It just has that sort of like just prettiness to it. And who knows, maybe she was doing that on purpose, but it's like a very pretty, peppy song about, surviving a nuclear holocaust. Well, Garcia takes it and he removes the pretty and the peppy, absolutely, and he brings out the starkness and the inherent drama of the song, and really gives it that even more cinematic feel. It gets the the big echoes, the dramatic, deep vocals, the mournfulness, the weight of the moment, the loneliness, all of that. But then you also get touches like Pigpen's organ, and Pigpen, Ron McKernan, he was the star of that first record. Those little organ touches, and almost it has a sway to it, but it's confident, and so it's like this, but confident but dramatic, and a serious rendition of a otherwise fluffy song about a serious topic.
Yeah, number four. Number 4, a song that made Chris Christopherson a shitload of money.
Yes, absolutely. We're talking about Janis Joplin's "Me and Bobby McGee," which is a really kind of, in some ways, almost a depraved narrative. It's a very, very country music is not supposed to be happy music.
Yeah,
and it's not supposed to be necessarily uplifting. It's story music, and this is a really just kind of. It's dark in a way. It's almost, it's, kind of bad people kind of on the road together, doing not so great things, and are just kind of, they're aligned, and maybe they don't necessarily want to be, but they have to be. And so that's the spirit of the song. So, Christofferson, his story is really kind of fascinating. I believe he was like a helicopter pilot in the military.
Yeah.
He was career military, and
Right.
he was writing these songs, and, cause he was an Oxford guy too. He was like top flight, Ivy League Oxford. And he was Army. And again, I think he was a helicopter pilot or mechanic or something like that. And so songwriting was something that he worked on while he was in the military. And he was able to find his way out of that. And so he's one of the great country songwriters of all time, about, if it's about lonely alcoholics and like people doing stuff they might not want to be doing, Chris Christofferson was your boy. But if you really wanted to translate it, you put it in the hands of somebody that was, who actually kind of lived the spirit of the song, right?
Right.
In Janis Joplin. Right. Janis Joplin, the famous hippie chick who, died with a needle in her arm. And so in her hands, there's a depth, an emotional depth to it. She translates the frustration, really. I think frustration is the emotion. There's frustration, there's yearning to be free. Obviously the famous line, freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose.
Yeah.
And I think she kind of captures, there's a weird hope in that. And so it's a tale of a dead end, but that is underwritten with hope, that Joplin, obviously in those famous vocals at the end, those vocal runs, brings out marvelously and just heavenly. And, Joplin, she's, again, it just makes me sad thinking of her, with like the kind of stuff that she could have done after that.
Number 3, Joe Cocker and his version of the Beatles with a little help from my friends. Now, do I really need to explain this one?
No. Yeah. It doesn't take much explanation, but explain anyway.
Yeah. Cocker takes what in the Beatles' hand, the brilliant original version by the Beatles, which was this, catchy, warm, whimsical song about hippie solidarity, and just blows it out into this just cosmic gospel epic mantra about just universal love. And it is a searingly powerful song with vocals by a singer who at his time was probably the best white male vocalist in rock at the time. Oh, yeah. It has an incredible guitar solo by Jimmy Page, who shortly before he formed, actually he already had Led Zeppelin going on, but he was still doing session work. And remember, this song came out in late 1968, and it became a big hit early the next year. And then after Cocker's performance at Woodstock, this song got even more popular. And it kind of dwarfed the Beatles version, which is saying something.
It
did. By the Beatles is an accomplishment, but his version, it's pure, full on cosmic gospel. And with it's such a searingly emotional version. You have to be a stone cold robot to not be moved by Cocker's version of With a Little Help from My Friends. Is it bombastic? Yes. That's the point of gospel. It's supposed to be bombastic.
But it's it was a bombastic song to begin with. Basically what it was Lennon and McCartney doing bombast, but in the context of that concept. As McCartney has said, there wasn't a Sgt. Pepper's concept past the title song and With a Little Help from My Friends.
Yeah,
I mean, that's, the jazz, the anonymous jazz band in the park doing ditties.
Right.
But, Joe Cocker, like you said, he gets that transcendence, and which is funny because it's a song about drugs. And so
I get high with a little help from my friends.
Yeah, exactly. And so he turns that, it's like you said, it's almost like a prayer to God.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, done by a guy who, obviously was as he says, I imbibed drink and drug, quite a lot. He said that in an interview or something like that. But I think the main reason, I think a lot of us Gen Xers, what we most associate this song with is the TV show The Wonder Years.
Yeah.
Which was just indelible. It's a wonderful one of the best TV shows of that era. Is at number 3.
Right. Number 2 is a song, and we're getting near the end here. Number 2 is a song that arguably should be number 1.
Yeah.
But it's at number 2. It is Joan Jett and her, speaking of transcendent, her transcendently rocking version, and to this day, her defining anthem, a song that is indelibly etched into our pop cultural vernacular. I love rock and roll.
Yeah, no one did iconography quite like Joan Jett back in that era, or ever, really. Yeah. So the story of this song, I Love Rock and Roll, it originates in 1975. And it was done by a British band called the Arrows and was written by a guy named Alan Merrill. The original is wonderful. It's a really, really good version. It's basically got the same tempo, obviously the same riff. It's got it's more full. I mean, it's more of a rhythm section. It's got more of a rumble to it, but it's just a great song. It's like a perfect rock pop song. But it's basically saying it's a song about impressing a member of the opposite sex in a bar. And so it's a very sort of simple, let's enjoy the moment, sort of sing along, clap along kind of song. And it's the original. Now, notice how I said sing along, clap along kind of song. Well, you don't really get the sing along, clap along. You get the rockiness of it and the fun of the original. What Joan Jett and Ricky Byrd, who's the lead guitarist who was in the Blackhearts, Joan Jett and the Blackhearts, what they do, and through in collaboration with their producers, is they did a more minimal, spacier, more detached version of it, and so shifting the perspective of the song from the male in the bar, hunting for the girl, turns it into the woman at the bar yearning for the guy, and which makes it almost, there's in the hands of a guy, it's in the hands of a woman. How dare her, she have a sexual appetite, right?
Which is a great interpretive trick, considering that Joan Jett is gay.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like, she's a woman hitting on a woman at a bar. Exactly. And so you have to give it up for that. But like I said, so they took the minimal approach. There is bass on the song in there somewhere. And so the sort of the echo.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah. And so here you have a song by this British punk band that has like the greatest sing-along, clap-along chorus imaginable. And so what did Joan Jett and her collaborators do? They built in the sing-along and the clap-along, like literally. And it is,
double down on that. Yeah.
And so every time it comes on the radio still, I sing along. It's just a fun ass song. And sometimes, if I hear it, I mean, rarely around the house, but once in a while, I'll pull it up on Spotify, like once a year or something. And I just kind of clap along to it. And strange, but true. I learned this from the Wikipedia page for this song. And, sometimes, Wikipedia gets a bad rap, but it is a great, great resource for finding the original sources.
Sure.
And is very well managed. But she actually did an original version of this. She recorded it originally with Steve Jones of the Sex Pistols and one of the other guys from the Sex Pistols lineups. That they were the guitarist, the lead guitarist, and the drummer basically on this early recording. So Joan Jett originated this. She first learned of it when she was on tour with the Runaways, and then when she went solo, she did the original demo, or her first attempt at the song. She did it with the Sex Pistols. So
wow. So that was a long time ago.
Damn.
This came out in 1982, 81.
This is 1981.
The album was released, but it became a huge hit in 82.
Yeah, thanks to MTV. Because you got to remember, it came out in 81, but it's also got arguably, not the most iconic video is Billie Jean, probably. By Michael Jackson, but it's close. One of the most iconic videos of all time with, Joan Jett in the bar, black and white, her looking all badass, and the whole, basically getting the whole bar to sing along is kind of the gimmick of the song or of the video.
Yeah.
And then, of course, a couple years, I think the next year, Weird Al did his version, "I Love Rocky Road," which is wonderful. I mean, the video parody is wonderful. But anyway, so yeah, you got to give it up for Joan Jett. A neat trick, taking a male horn dog hunter song and turning it into a female horn dog hunter song, and finding the anthemic nature of it that Alan Merrill didn't quite bring out.
Yeah, that's what makes it a better cover version.
Absolutely. It's absolutely
find something in it that the original songwriter did not find.
Yeah, I'm telling you, like if you looked in an encyclopedia and I know we've covered the early rock and roll recently, but if you did a encyclopedia entry for rock and roll, it might as well just say as a cross reference right in front, "See, I Love Rock and Roll" by Joan Jett.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how rock and roll the song is. But ultimately, it is not quite as textbook rock and roll as our selection for the number one rock and roll cover song of all time. And even though
drum roll, that's the drum roll.
Yes, and even though I advocated for the Dead, it was kind of easy to relent on this one because this one is right there. And we do agree, for the purposes of this list, this is the best and number one rock cover of all time. What is it, Arturo?
It is the Beatles and their 1963 version of "Twist and Shout." Everyone knows this song. Why do you know this song? Because of the fucking Beatles. That's why you know it. No one knows it. No one knows any of the other versions. This was originally a song written in 1961 by Phil Medley and Burt Burns, and he was credited as Burt Russell, and it was done by the Top Notes. Mm-hmm. They were this obscure little R&B combo. They were on Atlantic Records. They released their version. It really wasn't that much of a hit. It wasn't really very good. It actually didn't chart at all. Forget about not that much of a hit. However, the Isley Brothers got around to this song in 1962, a year later, and they did a much, much better version.
Oh, great version.
Much better version. They went top 20 in 1962 with their version of it. Lo and behold, a little old band from Liverpool got around to this. Now, here's the thing you have to know about the early Beatles. We're talking about early Beatles here. You've got to stress the word early. The Rolling Stones, at the time, they were a blues and R&B covers band. Now, the Beatles, when they did their covers, they did some R&B, but their strength as a covers band wasn't blues or rhythm and blues. Their strength as a covers band was doing Motown type soul and girl group pop. That's what Lennon and McCartney really, really, really loved. Brill building,
and they excelled at it. I mean, they were amazing at it.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting to. They excelled at that brill building girl group pop, covering that, and they excelled at covering Motown and like black R&B soul, not rhythm and blues, R&B. There's a difference.
Yes,
and the Beatles excelled at covering that. And what you have to understand, early Beatles, there was no white group on the planet that can do that kind of black R&B pop like the Beatles could in their early years. And this song is the purest example of that. Yes, the band sounds great. The instrumentation is great. But what really puts this over as the greatest rock and roll cover of all time is the vocals of John Lennon.
Yep.
John Lennon's vocals and the way he attacks this song. It manages to be soulful, pleading, angsty, and macho at the same time, which is an impossible task for any singer. But guess what? John Lennon, one of the greatest pure white male vocalists who ever walked the face of the earth, nails it on this song. Now, Paul McCartney had more vocal range. True. But Lennon had more soul. He had a spark that made him bite into the lyrics more than McCartney did. It's like the difference between Ella Fitzgerald and Billie Holiday. Technically, Fitzgerald was a better singer. Holiday lived the lyrics of those songs more. And you can say the same thing in the dynamic between McCartney and Lennon as vocalists. Yes, McCartney had more of a range. Technically, he was a better singer. He had better pitch. Lennon had more power. He had more soul.
Absolutely.
He lived and bit into the words more. And his vocal performance on Twist and Shout outdid anything that came before it and everything that came afterward. Whether you're white, black, male, female, whatever. Lennon's vocals on Twist and Shout are so transcendent, so uplifting, powerful, moving. The lyrics are actually kind of trite. Coming out of John Lennon's mouth, the lyrics are not trite.
Yeah.
Like twisting and shouting become the meaning of life coming out of the mouth.
I was going to say, it's like full-on contortion.
It becomes a spiritual message coming out of John Lennon's mouth. And the vocals that he did for this song, one take, all done, one take. He blew his voice out afterward. Because back in those days, people did many, many, many retakes. George Martin wanted to do more takes of it. And he realized, we can't do any better than this.
Yeah, I think
the guy couldn't sing anymore.
well, that's what happened is they tried to do a second take and Lennon couldn't get through it because he had blown himself out. And so, this song and this performance is a big, big, big part. And it's kind of an add-on. Maybe you call this the appendix to or the post note to our last episode on Lennon. A big part of his legacy comes from this vocal performance. It's that almost rock and roll is religion, this sort of worshiping at the altar of this kind of power and this kind of emotion and this kind of abandon, and it's this feeling and it's this depth and it's this rawness.
Yeah.
And that gets translated. And it kind of became something that defined Lennon. And obviously, as we said, by the mid-'70s, he was annoyed by his own mythology. But it kind of starts here, as the guy who could just really, who could let's make a spiritual argument for rock and roll. Okay, so this cultural professor at Harvard, okay, you go first. Okay, now let's make an argument. Now maybe like Elvis and Tom Parker. Okay, you go next. Okay, well, we're too busy doing Viva Las Vegas. So who were we going to get to do the spiritual dissertation on rock and roll? Well, here comes Lennon into the studio, and in one take and in one song captures it. It's this, there's a power and a pain and a romanticism basically there's a relationship, a visceral relationship that rock and roll artists have to their music. And, Lennon, I mean, he flips his shit, makes Little Richard seem like he's like a little kid doing Sunday school songs, right? Yeah. By comparison, it's like he takes it even farther than them guys, Yeah. So it's just a fascinating, let's just all bring down. And just here's this one rock and roll song with this one performance, and it is just wonderful. So here we are. We've gone through all 30 of these songs, and it's been, wow, that was fun, man. That was fun. Folks, we've come to the end of this episode. As we like to remind you, we've talked about it several times throughout this episode. We have our Facebook Curmudgeonly community. If you're already a member, just remember that you can invite friends of yours to come on in. And even though we're invite only, chances are we'll let everybody in and it'll be good times had by all. Also, we did something controversial here. We did not anoint All Along the Watchtower #1. What are your thoughts on that? Hit us up at curmudgeonrock@gmail.com. And then, come find us on Twitter. Twitter is a weird place these days. And so we're in the thick of it. We follow and love Jason Isbell, and we follow and hate John Rich. We follow, basically, if you're an 80s metal guy and you're on Twitter, your feed is fucking great. Like Paul Stanley's feed is fucking great. So check that out.